make sure that their rights are put in the core of the EU external action. And one of the focus areas for them has been the partnership between EU and Africa. And in that context, they have given the platform for young advocates, both from Europe and Africa, to get together and speak about their needs and their aspirations and how those can fit into the EU and Africa partnership. So that being said, the objective today is for us to give a space for our young advocates to share their messages with the decision makers from Africa and Europe, and to really ensure that their voices and priorities are once again heard and that no one is left behind. So before I hand over the floor to our young advocates, just to very briefly introduce everyone who is joining us today. So I'm Inge. I'm one of the young experts at the AU-EU Youth Cooperation Hub, and I'll be moderating the discussion today. Also joining us is Ms. Bitania Lulu Berhanu, who is the Special Advisor on Youth to the EU Commissioner Jutta Urpilainen. We have Ms. Birgitte Markussen, who is the Ambassador and Head of the EU Delegation to the African Union. We have Ms. Nyandoh Tadfor, who is the Communication Lead at the African Union Commission for Women, Gender and Youth Directorate. And we will also hear from her colleague, Ms. Victoria Maloka, who is providing a video message. And lastly, but not least, we have Ms. Stella Ronner-Grubacic, who is the European External Action Service Special Advisor on Gender and Diversity. And for those who are on Zoom, you can see we have lots of young advocates from different parts of the world. I'll quickly mention everyone's names and where they're from, just so we really understand how international this audience and presence is today. We have Toko Tsile and Dora, who are joining us from Zambia. We have Kevin from Kenya, Nancy from Sierra Leone. We have Laura, who is both French and British, but she's based in Belgium. Michelle from Zimbabwe and Habiba from Tanzania. So all the young people and many more that I didn't mention have been gathering actually in the past few months to get together and discuss what are their key messages on how European Union and African Union and their partnership can really provide an opportunity to put girls' rights at the very core of their decision-making and programming. And today they will be presenting some very concrete ideas and recommendations that they have. And these interventions will be primarily in 4 key priority areas, which are education and economic empowerment, sexual and reproductive health and rights, political participation, and also sexual and gender-based violence. So next, I will be handing over the floor to our 4 of our young advocates. They will each have, just a reminder, you have about 3 to 4 minutes for your interventions. And don't worry about who is coming next. If you forget, I'll be calling out your name, and then feel free to take the floor and share your message with everyone here. So with that in mind, can we hear from Laura, who is going to speak about education?
Thanks, Inge, and hello everyone. My name is Laura. I'm a French and British national, now living in Brussels, and for the past 2 years, I've been a youth ambassador for the One campaign, and I'm passionate about advocating for gender equality and girls' right to education, which is why I'm going to be talking to you today about education and economic empowerment. So why does education matter? Well, education has a direct impact on a country's economic prosperity. Education is one of the most powerful means of achieving gender equality, acquiring literacy and life skills. And education not only benefits the individual, but also the community. If all adults completed secondary education, we could cut global poverty in half. Across Africa, there are 9 million girls between the ages of 6 and 11 who will never go to school. That's 9 million lost potential. COVID has had a massive negative impact on girls' access to education and on economic empowerment. At its peak, there's an estimated 250 million children from sub-Saharan Africa out of school due to closures. The Lost Potential Tracker shows that COVID alone is responsible for over 11.4 million children failing to acquire basic literacy skills by their 10th birthday this year. Access to education is important to me because I was privileged enough to have access to a quality education, and I wouldn't be where I am today without it. I'm a firm believer of no child being left behind. As an avid reader and bookworm, the fact that 9 out of 10 African children cannot read or learn numbers at the age of 10 saddens me. And with the impact of COVID, one estimates that over half the world's 10-year-olds could be unable to read by the end of 2021. This is why, as One Youth Ambassadors, we have spent months raising awareness at the Global Education Summit and lobbying for a fully funded GP. COVID lockdowns did not get in our way. We've been campaigning online, using social media in our outreach. We sent campaign messages to policymakers via postcards. We collected more than 100 signatures in support of our education petition and recorded a video of ourselves reading that same petition in more than 20 languages. This action paid off, and President von der Leyen announced a €700 billion contribution to GP for the next 7 years, which is an amazing contribution and a really strong commitment. But what now? We need action. And to address the challenges that I've mentioned, we have the following 3 asks. Firstly, promoting access to and completion of quality inclusive education at all levels for all girls and young women. We youth advocates would like to highlight the importance of scholarships and making sure girls are safe on the way to and from school. Secondly, taking measures to promote girls as drivers of the digital transformation and to address the digital gender divide, which is especially relevant now due to the COVID pandemic and with schooling and learning going online. We need to support girls' access to digital devices and promote digital skills and girls' participation in STEM fields and IT, including by tackling occupational stereotypes and gender biases in curricula. And thirdly, supporting young women's economic empowerment by ensuring equal opportunities and fighting gender norms and stereotypes. We need to address gender norms, be they in the workplace or in education, that confine girls and boys to certain subjects, and which later lead to occupational segregation and gender-based discrimination in the workplace. I urge the EU partnership to take these asks on board and address these challenges so we can give these girls and communities a better future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. We are moving to Kenya next to hear from Kevin about the sexual reproductive health and rights. You have the floor, Kevin.
Thank you very much, dear ladies and gentlemen, for this great opportunity. My name is Kevin Owala, a DSW champion from Kenya. I'm very passionate on issues of sexual reproductive health and rights, and that's why I'm very engaged into ending sexual gender-based violence, teenage pregnancy, early marriage, and sexual reproductive health and rights challenges. Together with my youth group, we run many activities and initiatives to raise awareness about sexual and reproductive health and rights, sensitizing community leaders and doing advocacy at local level to make sure girls and young people can access sexual and reproductive health services they need. Every girl has the right to lead a healthy and self-determined life. Still, too often girls face multiple barriers preventing them from accessing health services with their specific needs. For example, girls are disproportionately affected by HIV, new infections among young women aged between 14 to 15 years old, are 44% higher than among boys. In addition, 82% of new HIV infection among young women in 2019 were in sub-Saharan Africa, where 7 in 10 girls do not have comprehensive knowledge about HIV. In my community, Girls also face many challenges, and I would like to present to you some of the examples. Number one, lack of information on sexual reproductive health and rights. Girls lack access to comprehensive sexual education, which gives them the possibility to young people, and in particular girls, to better understand their bodies and their rights, to address the power relations in their lives, and to counter harmful gender norms and stereotypes. It's difficult for girls to have access to reliable information on sexual reproductive health and rights, especially during COVID. Number two is teenage pregnancy. Teenage pregnancy rates in my community are very high, and it is a serious issue which needs an urgent reaction, as it can lead to poverty in community and stigmatization. When girls get pregnant, they may end up dropping out of schools, which contribute to low education level. Their career is tempered and having a negative impact on the whole community. Number three is lack of youth-friendly corners and youth service providers. It's a challenge for young people in my community to access sexual and reproductive health services in youth-friendly corners. Young people often face stigma and discrimination when seeking sexual reproductive health and rights services. That is why it's important for health facilities to have youth-friendly centers where young people can go to seek sexual reproductive health and rights services. The COVID-19 pandemic has even exacerbated the obstacles for girls and women to access health services, and in particular, sexual and reproductive health services. The pandemic could result in additional 49 million women with unmet need for modern contraceptives, and in addition, 15 million unintended pregnancy over the course of a year. To address these challenges, together with my fellow EWAG young advocates, we think the EU-Africa partnership represents great opportunity to effectively address the challenges girls face. These are some of my recommendations, the recommendation that we have. Number one, the EU-Africa partnership should promote and allocate adequate funding for universal access to girls to youth-friendly health services, including sexual reproductive health rights and comprehensive sexual education, reaching all young people, also those living in remote or rural areas. Number two, EU and Africa should also work more together, also through the political dialogue, to fight harmful gender norms and laws that prevent girls from accessing the health services they need to live healthy and self-determined life. And lastly, the EU should also support African countries in responding to the COVID-19 crisis in a comprehensive manner, including through the strengthening of health system, including sexual and reproductive health services. I think that is what I have at the moment, and may God bless you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your inputs and your recommendations, Kevin. Now let's hear from Nancy, who will tell us about, who's going to talk about political participation.
Hello, everyone. I am Nancy, a 16 years advocate of World Vision Sierra Leone. I've been a child advocate for 3 years now. I just finished my West African Senior Secondary School certificate examination, and it gives me joy to speak on behalf of the vulnerable children in and out of my community. Today, I'll be talking about girls' participation and political empowerment. Political participation includes the freedom of expression and opinion on the world and how it is governed, and the possibility to take part in decisions that affect one's life. Girls and women, particularly in Sierra Leone, face challenges and have limited ability to influence the social norms and political climates that govern their lives. In my community today, girls and women continue to remain the single most discriminated group. There are many factors that affect political participation. One is education. Without education, girls and women are denied basic qualifications for active participation in politics. Gender is another factor in the world today that affects political participation, as girls are not given the opportunity to take decisions that support their well-being, simply based on the fact that they were born female. Traditional norms and values additionally undermine the importance and voice of girls and young women. Violence is another thing that also affects political participation. Due to violence, girls and women get scared in participating in politics because a lot of violence occurs during political protests and they might be specifically targeted because of their gender. Enabling and empowering girls and women to have a voice is one of the most effective ways to unlock their potentials. When they participate in politics, they become change makers, both in their own lives as well as in their communities. Child and youth participation encourage girls and youth to express their views and be involved in shaping decisions that affect them in an informed way. Political participation fosters youth leadership, enabling children and youth to individually and collectively use their power and skills to mobilize others around a shared agenda or goal of social, cultural, and political transformation for equality and human rights of all. It is important for political participation to start at a young age for girls because these are the most formative years in a girl's life, during which girls and young women build confidence in themselves and know the worth of their voices, and learn to take up their rights and actively engage in social and political life. As a young EWAG advocate, I recommend to create or form policies that promotes the education of the girl child. Secondly, community engagement and sensitizations to challenge the root causes of gender inequalities. And thirdly, create an open safe space for girls to involve and participate in political issues and make decisions on their own. In addition, I have a question. As EU and AU partners, what have you done or what are you planning to do to create an opportunity for girls and women to safely participate in political affairs and be able to make decisions that support their well-being? Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And our last intervention for this round is from Tokotsile, who is joining us from Zambia. And they will be speaking about the gender-based violence. Sorry, Tokotsile, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and all distinguished guests. My name is Tokozile Sanga from Zambia. I'm 16 years old and I am doing my 12th grade at Minali Girls Secondary School. I am privileged and humbled to give my speech to you on violence and harmful practices. Ladies and gentlemen, violence is being practiced against girls and women in many ways, and it's been treated as a cultural practice, especially in our country and the African continent. Girls and women are abused both physically and psychologically by their communities through harmful practices. For example, in Zambia, it's possible to find a child as young as 12 years old married off into a very abusive home. Young children are being forced into early marriages by their parents or by their surviving guardians when they're still young. And it's even become more worse during the COVID-19 pandemic as most children were just at home. Furthermore, gender-based violence is also a common thing among women and young girls. It's a very serious issue and problem that affects women and young girls. It leaves people with many different diseases, and personally, I feel it leaves girls and women traumatized due to the abusive things that happen to them in their homes. So I would like to conclude with understanding how much of a trivial matter violence and harmful practices are, and it needs to be eradicated completely. So I would therefore recommend that the AU-EU partnership engages the Zambian government and all the other African leaders to enforce laws against gender-based violence, because putting a law on paper doesn't completely eradicate the problem. You need to enforce the laws and ensure that offenders of such practices are brought to book and are apprehended. I would also like to recommend that the AU-EU partnership should focus on empowering more women, because they continue to remain in homes where they are violated because they still depend on men. So if women and girls are empowered and sensitized on their rights and all their privileges, it's easier for them to make a stand on their own and live independently. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tokotile. And thanks again for everyone for your inputs. And I feel like a lot of the interventions that we just heard, they're really powerful and they really came from the heart. But at the same time, it's a little bit disheartening to hear about some of these challenges that young people, but especially girls, face, and not only in Africa, but also in Europe. Because what's really, I think, came out from these interventions is that a lot of these challenges are shared between the two continents. So that being said, we had some key recommendations for the institutions. So I would now like to hand over the floor to our decision makers. I would like to start with Bitania. So you've heard, I mean, you heard, I know everyone else heard as well, the young advocates calling on the EU and African decision makers to really hear their voices, but also more broadly, the voices of other young people, especially when it comes to sort of defining what the future EU-Africa partnership should look like. You are the advisor on youth to the EU Commissioner, Ms. Urpilainen. How do you think decision makers can make sure to fully include young people, not only when it comes to shaping their strategy and partnership, but also in its implementation?
Thank you very much, Inge. I hope I'm audible. I'm extremely excited to see all these young advocates speaking out directly to decision makers and having very clear asks. And as young as 16-year-old, I'm very impressed by them, and I'm very motivated by the work that I do, seeing all these young advocates fighting for the things that I've been fighting for the past decade or so. And I'm very excited to see the commitment from both the European Union and the African Union on girls. And I'd like to applaud all the 9 NGOs that came together to form the EWAG and to organize such a great platform that really pushes the decision makers to actually act, walk the talk. I'd also like to acknowledge the European Union DG ENSPA for appointing me as the very first special advisor on youth. It's the first time that the EU has introduced such a thing, and I would like to also acknowledge Commissioner Urpilainen's commitment to young people. And in my appointment, I'm a young girl. So this also sets an example for other heads of states and other decision makers to ensure that young people are in partnership with them when they're making the decision and when they're implementing the policies that they design. All the 5 great things that were chosen today were touched upon by the young advocates. Laura has beautifully explained to us how education is very important, and if it's done right, and if education is really invested on, the global poverty could be halved. She's had a very specific ask, and we know that economic restraints are still upon women, not just in Africa, but in the developing world as well. But specifically in the developing world, we have laws that are restraining women from having lands on their own, from having equal pay. So all these things need to be fought against, and we need to act upon them. And the last speaker has beautifully said that policies are not enough. We need to enforce the laws. Harmful practices are, of course, restraining young girls from realizing their potential. And meaningful engagement goes beyond just giving young people a voice. Great, it's great that we have platforms to speak upon on these issues, but it's not enough to just listen to us right now. It needs to be acted upon. And for actions to come, institutionalization of those policies need to follow, because we have beautiful policies in Africa and Europe. The one thing that's lacking is that the engagement of young people from the development phase of the policies, and as well as institutionalizing those policies, trickling it down to the grassroots level. So I would, of course, like to call upon the EU and AU to push their member states and to also show through the partnership of those two continental organizations that these policies that we have need to be changed, need to be always improved by engaging young people. And at the same time, they're institutionalized and embedded into the systems of the grassroots level. And youth inclusion and governance and decision making is utmost crucial, not only because of the alarming demography in Africa. We have over 70% of the population under the age of 30, and also the invaluable contribution that young people bring, the innovative mindsets, the energy, the creativity, the mobilization skills, the digitization skills that we have. Young people managed to drive the biggest revolutionary movement, which is climate change, just using digital means and mobilizing themselves. And we have fast learning skills. So young people must be at the center of revising all the policies and also implementing them. And we need to have girls at the center of SRH policies as well, because for young people to be effective drivers of development, we must be healthy first, and then we should have access to affordable and quality healthcare. And at the same time, having laws that protect us, that get enforced, because we see a lot of men getting away with all the harmful practices that are being restrained upon girls and young women here. So it's very motivating for me to see all these young advocates here today from both continents, and at the same time to be joined here by decision makers and to be given the platform to speak with the young people and decision makers as a young person myself, but also as a privileged young leader who's a special advisor to the European Commissioner for International Partnerships. So I do applaud all the efforts of the organizers. And yeah, I would like to underscore the asks that were already mentioned by the young advocates. Thank you very much. Back to you, Inge.
Thank you so much, Bitania. And thank you actually for all the work you are doing. I mean, your presence at the kind of highest levels, institutional levels, is definitely an inspiration, I think, to many young people in Europe, Africa, but also the rest of the world. And, you know, we really count on you to make sure that everyone's voices, at least in Brussels, are heard. So before I hand over to the next speaker, just a very quick reminder to everyone joining us today. If you do have any questions, then feel free to use the questions and answers box that's on Zoom, it's below, or the chat box. And we will get to your questions at the very end of the panel today. So next, I would like to give the floor to Ambassador Markussen from the EU delegation to the African Union. The young advocates presented some very concrete recommendations on how the future EU-Africa partnership could effectively address girls' aspirations and respond to the challenges they face. And we know there are some very high-level EU-Africa meetings coming up. There is one at the end of this month and another summit early next year, I believe. What would you say, how can the EU make sure that this partnership will respond to girls' aspirations and that addressing girls' rights in general will be on the agenda at these meetings?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody here from Addis Ababa, where we have the EU delegation to working with the African Union, which means that we're working with countries actually from all over the continent, and issues also related to the continent, and of course linking them to the European Union. Today I will give you a few highlights of what I'm passionate about in this discussion and in today's discussion at the Day of the Girl. I'm very much also in listening mode, so I have taken a lot of notes of what was said already by the young representatives, both Laura, Kevin, Nancy, and Tupu Sile. And I think it was very refreshing to hear also how concrete suggestions there are. But let me introduce with a few observations from my side. As you will know, you just mentioned, Inge, we are just actually in full preparations for the upcoming ministerial, which is a meeting between ministers of foreign affairs from Europe and from Africa, and that's going to take place on the 26th of October. So we are in really full negotiations of the joint positions. And I can assure you that the issue of human rights, including women and girls' rights, is high on the EU agenda. You will know it is extremely important the work you are doing, because we can do as decision makers, and I'm always very happy to take a stand for women and girls, but it is equally important that you as civil society and you as citizens in your own countries, that you keep making the points, because we will very happily create the framework and support you with concrete activities, but showing that citizens are involved and showing that to your own politicians is really important. Across the board, we are involved in many African initiatives, both and strategies. There is an Agenda 2063, there is silencing the guns, there is also the new important AFCFTA, which is a free trade area for the African region, which is very promising and where we are very active. I would like to mention also that I think if I look across the years I've been engaged in this area, I thought it was very promising and a wake-up call to see the whole Me Too movement that actually moved across the world and actually showed to many of us how much it matters, and that it matters that all of us at all levels that we actually speak up about what is happening. It was a wake-up call to myself as well. You might think that women have the access, the rights and so on, and then you find out that there is something really not going in the right direction in many places. We as the European Union, we are fully behind the issues that were mentioned today in terms of the importance of education, sexual reproductive health and rights, what you talk about, the political participation, and of course the elimination of all forms of gender-based violence. You will find a lot of text on this, but what I would like to do is to show you some examples of what we are doing to make this difference, to walk the talk, and as I also say, to show that we also talk the walk, which means that we're listening and that we actually try to act upon what we're picking up. The first issue I'd just like to reflect on is education. You will know that from our end, actually in the next 7 years, 10% of the funds that are going to Africa will be spent on education. That is a tremendous opportunity. And I fully agree with Laura, who was talking about the importance of being educated. I think everybody here who's part of this will appreciate how much their education meant. When I was preparing for today, I was really astonished, of course, to see how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the situation of girls' education in particular. And I think this is something that should definitely catch our attention. We are also engaged with UN, of course, in some of you might know the Spotlight Initiative and so on and so forth. But I think the commitment of the 10% of our cooperation budget, which is huge, it's 32 billion euro for Africa, is a major commitment to girls' education and to education abroad. My other comment is to forced and early marriages. Kevin mentioned it, and I think this is again something that I'm passionate about to try to help young girls and women exactly to get their education, to have their own rights, and to be able to stand up for themselves. And that's the way you can stand up for yourself, is by being educated, being able to speak up like we do today. So I think this is really extremely important, and something that I think we should definitely work together on. My third area is just a few comments on female genital mutilation. Actually, this area was, when I was hired as a very young Danish diplomat in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the first guidelines I ever edited was on female genital mutilation. And I'm a bit older than most of you, so this is more than 20 years ago. What I want to say is this is something I'm passionate about still, and it's just something I can see still needs attention. And it, in particular, again, I think what I saw just looking at the population trend, I can see that we're actually looking into a scenario whereby the demographic growth means that we have all the time a trend where more and more girls will need help in terms of not having to go through female genital mutilation. It is a mutilation. It's not just cutting. It is a mutilation, and I think this is really important, again, for girl and women's opportunities to speak up and to have their own say over their own life. Obviously, reproductive health and rights is at the center of this discussion. Lastly, my fourth point is just the importance of the participation in decision-making of youth and girls. We need to hear your voice like we hear it today. Please keep on speaking up. We need female girl leaders, and we are here to listen today. We will also, I can tell you, we have plans for the upcoming ministerial, but also working for the summit, as you mentioned, Inge, coming up next year between the European Union and African Union and all our member states to give a special voice to youth. And I will definitely also, I've taken good notes of today's discussion. But as I said initially, because what I can hear, being based in Africa, working on these issues, it's important that you speak up and play the role you're playing, because reproductive health and rights is one of the difficult issues in our ongoing negotiations right now, to find the common language between the two parties. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'll stay on and listen. It's great to be here with you. Thank you. Back to you, Inge.
Thank you so much. It's good to hear that you are personally very passionate about many of the issues that the young advocates have mentioned today, because oftentimes it comes down to, you know, having to individually push for things to happen. And yeah, we definitely count on you as well to make sure that, you know, the EU does put you know, it follows up on what it says it will do. And we will be following the conversations that will be taking place this month and later on at the different meetings between the political leaders. And we'll keep an eye out for any concrete commitments that come from these meetings. But most importantly, I think what most of the young people are looking for is the actions, not just commitments, but really see that something is happening. We will now also hear from the African Union side. So we will play a video message from Miss Victoria Maloka, who is from the Women, Gender and Youth Directorate of the African Union Commission. Could I ask one of the organizers to play the video, please? Could we get confirmation on the Miss Maloka's video message? Is it going to be played now? Okay, I can see the screen is shared. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I greet you. Please accept my apologies as I could not be online. However, I'm sending this video on behalf of the Acting Director of the Gender and Youth Directorate of the African Union Commission, Prudence Ngwenya, as well as on my own behalf, as a demonstration of commitment, our commitment really to this AU partnership and to continue working together to accelerate action for the promotion and protection of girls. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce Ms. Nyandoh Tadfor, who will be speaking on behalf of the African Union Commission's Women, Gender and Youth Directorate. Ms. Nyandoh is not only carrying the burden on behalf of the young people of Africa, but she will do so in furtherance of the objectives of this European Week of Action for Girls, to give voice directly to the young people themselves, directly to the girls themselves, to share their own messages of concern, and of course with their particular focus on how COVID-19 has impacted their own lives. So therefore, I give the floor to Ms. Nyandoh Tadfor, and I wish you a very, very happy International Day of the Girl. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished guests, esteemed youth, ladies and gentlemen. I bring you warm greetings from the African Union Commission. Allow me to begin by extending my heartfelt gratitude to European Week of Action for Girls for extending the initiative to the Youth Division of the African Union Commission, and again, for providing this intergenerational platform that sees African youth as partners and not just beneficiaries of programs. It is my honor to make this intervention on behalf of the Acting Director of the Women, Gender and Youth Directorate at the African Union Commission, Ms. Prudence Ngwenya. I am Nyandoh Tadfor, the Communications Lead for the Health and Wellbeing Program within the Directorate. Africa's youth are indisputably the continent's most important resource. This is why the African Union Commission is increasing its focus and investment in addressing the pressing health needs of this important demographic. Most African countries have shown some level of commitment towards youth sexual reproductive health and rights and reproductive rights. However, youth continues to encounter challenges in accessing quality health information and services. Improving the health of youth is an important contributor towards making gains that will advance the youth agenda. If you look behind the curtain at the focal areas of our health and well-being program in the youth division, you will find that our focus is on empowering and mobilizing a critical mass of youth to advocate for gender equality, curbing harmful practices, and the promotion of health and well-being in an enabling environment. We note every day in this sector that a significant portion of young people struggle with inequality, poverty, and human rights violations that delay their well-being. As a result, achieving their full potential always remains just out of reach. The European Week of Action for Girls in particular is exciting for us at the African Union Commission, and especially the Youth Division, because it appreciates and brings to the fore the fact that unless the voices and aspirations of the African girl are heard, they will not be able to maximize their full potential in other avenues. It is important to be intentional in bringing the voices, innovation, and solution proposed by the youth to the table whenever matters about them are being discussed. We did this for the African Youth Charter and even Agenda 2063, which is a blueprint for the continent's development. We take this a step further in the youth division by deliberately engaging the youth through what we call the MOCAP framework. M is for mobilizing youth for action. COVID-19 showed us the inherent weaknesses in how we engage with youth. So this mobilization is now taking place online. And it is an important lesson about taking the message to the affected demographic and ensuring that communication remains two-way. We have been deliberate in mobilizing and engaging online and offline over 35,000 youth advocates in the past year. O is for orientation, and we endeavor to build the capacity of all young people who interact with us or our programs. Through the African Union Youth Engagement and Development Toolbox, 1,000 youth advocates have been trained in collaboration with our partners. For every young person in Africa, there is a voice inside of you that has the potential to change the continent. Under the 1 Million Youth Voices campaign, the Youth Division, in collaboration with partners, will hold 3 days of training under the theme Advocacy to Action, African Youth in Health, and this will run between the 27th and the 29th of October 2021. The overall aim of this training is to promote youth participation in advocacy initiatives on sexual and gender-based violence and harmful practices, and to increase their knowledge and skills in addressing related policies at continental, regional, and national levels. C is for conversations and connecting, where we establish co-creation spaces for youth and also broker interactions between them and duty bearers. We have organized and convened platforms for conversation and consultations, where we engage over 15,000 youth via our conversation series, dubbed the Egumeni Sessions. A speaks for activation. We always want youth to go into their communities and do something with what they have learned. And because there are 453 million young people on the continent, we are unlikely to reach them all. This is why we employ this cascading model that says each one must teach one. A is for advocacy. We are clear that everything we do requires visibility as well as high-level and peer-to-peer advocacy. It is our ethos in the division that advocacy is an effective tool for enhancing policy implementation, strengthening partnership, and raising awareness around critical thematic areas that allow us to unleash the potential of youth on the African continent. And P stands for partnership. We want everything that can benefit young people to have a high potential impact, and we recognize that we cannot do this alone. So we have an ecosystem of partners to support us in scaling up solutions that positively impact youth. Young people in Africa are not only beneficiaries of efforts to advance the youth development agenda, but they are also demonstrating leadership to respond to social, cultural, and economic challenges that prevent them from achieving their full potential and well-being. Young people in Africa are inspiring and driving the changes that are needed to advance the voices and aspiration using the power of entrepreneurship, alliances, and innovation. African girls are powerful agents of change, and nothing should stop them from participating fully in all areas of their life. We must all come together and show our commitment by dedicating resources for girls to realize their rights and fulfill their full potential. It is within our capabilities as African youth to change the status quo. We have what it takes, but it is going to take everything that we have. Happy International Day of the Girl Child. Bonne Journée Internationale de la Fille. I thank you all. Over to you, Inge.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Ms. Maloka, who unfortunately isn't here, but thank you for the video message. And thank you, Ms. Nyandoh, for your intervention and really engaging with the young advocates and responding to some of their recommendations. It's also super nice to hear that actually at the end of the day, both the institutions are on the same page when it comes to girls' rights and needs, and that they are actually working on the same goals. Now, we'd like to add another institutional angle to the conversation, someone who is truly, I would say, a subject matter expert. I'd like to give the floor to the Special Advisor on Gender and Diversity from the European External Action Service, Ms. Stella Ronner-Grubacic. So you've heard the young advocates presented some of their views on how the EU could promote girls' rights in different areas. They talked about education, sexual reproductive health, gender-based violence, political participation. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the EU's external action is really including these priorities in its work, and what is the type of work you're doing to make sure that the EU includes these priorities in the political dialogues with its African partners, but also coming up to the high-level events that are approaching?
Thank you, Inge, and thanks to all participating in this event. And let me at the outset start also to thank the organizers for doing this and for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be here. Of course, I would also very much like to congratulate the youth champions, because I really think that you are all doing a great job. And it seems to me also that the priorities that they have all talked about are actually very well chosen. And I'm saying that obviously because they are of particular importance for me in my job, being indeed, as you mentioned already, the EU Ambassador for Gender and Diversity. And maybe I should first say something very briefly about my mandate, because I have been appointed by the Secretary General of the EU's External Action Service, the EEAS, to be involved both in what the EU does internally when it comes to gender issues and diversity, as well as externally. So looking at the external actions of the EU, and there one can think of political interventions, but also our dialogue with various countries. And there, what I think needs to be mentioned first and foremost is the Gender Action Plan 3, GAP 3, that was adopted at the end of last year, but also an initiative that was already mentioned briefly by my colleague, the ambassador of the EU to the African Union, namely the Spotlight Initiative. But maybe a few words on the GAP 3 strategy, because at this moment we are really working very closely with all partners and other stakeholders on the implementation of this plan. And of course, I think as many of you know, this is a strategy that really promotes the leadership and meaningful participation of women, girls, and young people in the political, economic, social, and cultural life, as well as in all matters that are related to peace and security worldwide. And what we really want to see is to make this plan a reality with the help of some 80 billion euros that will support the EU's external action for the next 7 years. So that's a sizable sum of money that really goes to, among other things, supporting education and particularly girls' education. So on the one hand, we support education in emergencies, but also we have worked with partner countries throughout the pandemic to minimize, I mean, it was mentioned already, the devastating effect, of course, on learning and the well-being of children throughout the pandemic, and to facilitate a safe return to school. As far as the GAP is concerned, it's also good to know that on a country level, delegations, so EU delegations present in the different countries, have prepared or are preparing the so-called country local implementation plans, or shortly CLIPs, that really represent a very important tool for us to know how the situation in different countries is evolving and whether we are really progressing when it comes to implementation. I also mentioned very briefly the Spotlight initiative, and it is through this initiative that we really continue to remain at the forefront of supporting actions to fight really all forms of violence against women and girls. And this we see as a crucial prerequisite for the success of our political priorities around the world to promote peace, security, and sustainable development through the gender equality and women's empowerment. So it's really, again, another key tool needed that is used by us to really make progress and to fight gender-based violence. So through the Spotlight, we are investing in Africa, both at the regional level as well as in 8 sub-Saharan countries, for a total of about 215 million euros. We just, as we also heard previously, this is also to support the African Union Commission in working very closely together with member states and other stakeholders on its regional responses to address, again, gender-based violence and harmful practices, to collect, for instance, better data, but also to exchange and to learn and teach each other about best practices. This will also continue some of the work that has already been done in the past on the elimination of female genital mutilation and early and forced marriages. So from the perspective of the EU and for us, the Spotlight program in Africa is really part of a broader partnership with the African continent and helping us to really achieve progress there. There is a lot more that can be said about how we incorporate the priorities that have been set also at the multilateral level, at other multilateral organizations. But I wouldn't want to dwell on it, because I would like to have a little bit of time to also turn to what I mentioned in the beginning, namely the internal part of my mandate. And that basically starts from the idea that we cannot hope to achieve a more gender equal world with more opportunities for girls if we don't realize the same, so a gender equal organization, in our own house. I keep saying that, I've been doing it in several presentations thus far. We really are not credible nor coherent in our strategies and in our policies if we do not at the same time make sure that we have our own house in order. And there at this point, I would actually like to sort of shift my presentation to a different gear, or to a different level, if you will, and basically, as I would call it, connect the dots. Because one of the really key messages that I would like to get across to you, to the youth advocates, is that basically what you are doing, youth advocates, and what I am doing as ambassador for gender and diversity in the EU is very much the same work. And actually, I would add to this that no one can express better what is needed to empower girls than what was just done in the 4 introductions that I heard. And I would say that it is actually precisely by having an event like this one that we show to everybody who is listening or who will be watching this from all over the world how important it is to educate girls, to make sure that they are free from gender-based violence, or that they are economically empowered. And the fact that you are raising this awareness is really what I need in my turn to be able to produce the change that I want to produce in the EU External Action Service as well, to make this organization more gender balanced and diverse. And I'm saying that with some emphasis because by doing so, in turn, we can make sure that the output of the EU when it comes to our external actions and our policy dialogues reflects better the needs of girls and of youth overall. And so this is really what I mean when I say we are connecting the dots here, because you, by stressing the priorities as you have been doing, are really in a way preparing the road for the progress that I, as ambassador in the EU, and others with me, want to achieve. And I would basically conclude by saying that not only as an ambassador, but also very much as a woman and as a professional, I can only say, please continue doing what you're doing, because it is incredibly valuable. And as I often say, if we continue doing what we've always been doing, we will get what we've always gotten. And I hope this really inspires you to keep going for that change and the drive to make things better. So this is from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for telling us a bit more about what the EU is doing abroad, when it comes to, implementing its, strategies and commitments, and to, address all the issues that we've been talking about today. But, as you said very rightly, the change, if you want to see a change, it really starts from within. And, if the EU or any institution isn't diverse or gender balanced itself, then how can you go out and, have the strategies to kind of push this in other places if you're not doing it yourself? So it really starts from there. Thank you so much again. And thank you to all the other speakers as well. We now have time for a couple of questions from the youth advocates, but also from the audience. So a quick reminder again for the audience, if you do have any questions, there is a Q&A button in the below box, I would say. So just type it there and I will take a look very shortly. But I already know there are 3 questions from the youth advocates. So I would hand over the floor to Dora for your question. And Dora is joining from Zambia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for this privilege to be a part of this wonderful meeting. It has really been great to see how passionate everyone is about changing the world and actually making sure that the rights of a girl are actually implemented and not only written on paper, but making sure that they are being, addressed and people are actually following the rules and the regulations that are put forth. I'm Dora from Zambia, and I'm 12th grade. And I'm also a child advocate and journalist from my community. So my question to the EU and AU partnership is, how do you plan to involve children living with disabilities and also able that live in marginalized areas? It is really sad to note that not a lot of disabled children are actually involved in decision making. I feel it's not enough to only get views from able children on what is supposed to be implemented or what is supposed to be actually added in the EU and AU partnership on helping children. But I feel it is also important to make sure that views of children living with disabilities in marginalized areas are also good. Make sure that no child is actually left out, whether able or disabled. It doesn't matter where they come from, marginalized or not. But my area of interest is to make sure that every child is involved. So again, how do the EU-AU partnership plan on involving disabled, marginalized children in decision making and also making sure that they are not left out? Yes, I thank you.
Thanks a lot for your question. I will leave the floor open to any of the speakers to respond. If you would like. Please, Ambassador.
Yeah, I'm happy. Thank you, Dora. Greetings from Addis Ababa. I think it's absolutely. I heard you talk about at least two important issues. Of course, the importance of moving to real activities, and then the other aspect of what you said about also reaching marginalized areas and also children with disabilities. This is a very important challenge. I think the way we do it, if you want to ask at the moment, is that we, as the European Union, we have actually over the last years, we worked quite actively with youth networks in Africa and Europe, and build up both with the, I heard the colleague from the African Union Commission talking about the youth charter that you have, which is quite important. But what we try to do is, apart from working with the organizations, we also have developed over the last years something we call a youth hub. That is exactly the role to engage on practical and on real activities. And if you go, you are, I'm sure, very able to go into the social media. You will see the EU-AU Youth Hub is quite active. This is just what I can answer right now. Apart from that, when we sit in our paper negotiations, we also try to work to get the right language into the paper. I know you also need to move it to action, but it's also important to get it into the paper so that we can follow up on what has been agreed. Thanks a lot. Back to you. But thank you, Dora. All the best.
Thank you so much. We have the next question from Michelle, if you would like to take the floor.
Hi everyone, I hope I find you all well. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Michelle and I am from Zimbabwe. I'm a social work student and I'm also a young advocate from Zimbabwe under Plan International. So from as long as I can remember, wearing the responsibilities that comes with being a young advocate for young people and especially young women like myself, I have noted how both parents and young people are lacking education and opportunities. They end up in very vulnerable situations such as drug abuse and substance abuse. This is due to economic hardships and recently the COVID-19 that we are all aware of. It is a vicious cycle which sadly destroys their social life, education, and psychological status. My question for you today is, what is the key to improve the socio-economic status and empower young girls into education? And how are you working to make it a priority in dialogues with African counterparts? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question, Michelle. I'm giving the floor, opening it up again to our speakers. If anyone feels comfortable answering to Michelle.
Inge, maybe very generally answering to Michelle's question, and thank you, Michelle, for emphasizing again the importance of education. I think it's really basically something I mentioned through the different instruments that we have in place, that really education is put very much on the forefront. I think it has become very clear to everybody that if we don't do it right with education, all the rest that comes after that is going to be incredibly hard. So education is really, in the view of all of us, a key issue, has certainly a central role to play in this instrument that I mentioned when I spoke about the GAP strategy, and where there are really substantial sums of money to support our action in this field for the next years to come. Specifically, it is through these country implementation programs that I also mentioned, where we will need to see that in reality, on the ground, education is indeed given this central role to play. And we're still very much in the beginning of this whole process, because the GAP strategy was adopted at the end of last year. We are starting to see these country level implementation programs coming in. And you can be sure that me, my team, but also many others in our organization will very closely look at all those country programs to make sure that all the key priorities, such as education, are really there, so that we can rely that what we want and what we are talking about now through a virtual meeting is really happening on the ground in reality. I hope this answers your question a little bit.
Ambassador Markussen, please.
Yeah, well, of course, on the same line as Stella was just, but I just wanted to add, because sometimes I think it's important to understand how we work as the European Union. I mean, we have the office where Stella is in Brussels, and then I work here in Addis Ababa with the African Union. But we also have, and I think this is extremely important, we have delegations in most African countries. So in Harare, if you're based in Harare in Zimbabwe, there is an EU delegation that has the aim of working with the education objective that we just discussed. So apart from Stella and I having taken note of what was said right now, what I think is important is also to engage with our delegations in country, because now you know that there is a political objective to actually do a lot for education, and also the hard to reach areas. I very much hear what you're saying in terms of the lack of education and opportunities, and how COVID-19 has also influenced this. I think this is it's simply created. I know that we all see across Africa, actually, but also across Europe, the economic impact of the COVID-19, and we're just in the beginning of recovering, and not everywhere. We all know the issues of access still to vaccines. We as the European Union, one of our big priorities this year, of course, and also next year, to work on all types of COVID-19 related measurement, also supporting production of vaccines in Africa, and so on and so forth. But I'll just say there is an EU delegation in Zimbabwe, and when you talk about what really needs to be implemented, that I would also go to them, apart from we've been listening today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. I hope this answered your question, Michelle. We also have a question from our young advocate from Tanzania, Habiba. If you would like to take the floor.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Please feel free to ask a question. Sorry, Habiba, your connection is a little bit poor at the moment. We can't really hear you. Habiba, we cannot really hear you. Habiba, if you I think your connection is a little bit poor, but if you'd like, maybe you can type your question in the chat and then I can ask it in just a little bit. And or if your connection gets better, then we can come back to you in a few minutes, if that's fine. Okay. I would like to take at least one question from the audience now. We have an interesting question from Beth Canario, from Kenya, who is a children's education advocate. And I think this question is probably best directed at Bitania and Nyandoh. So the question is, can you name or bring examples of some concrete platforms or ways that advocates can reach out directly to the institutions and really directly maybe share their recommendations with the institutions and engage?
Okay, thank you very much for the question.
Sorry, Bitania, do you want to go first and then Nyandoh?
Okay, we can do that. So the AU partnership has created a great platform for young people to directly engage in it. After the 5th AU-EU Heads of State Summit in 2017, they've adopted a joint statement that they should put young people at the center for sustainable development. And as the outcome of that, there's the EU-AU Youth Cooperation Hub that's been launched in 2017, and it's been running, still it's running. It's housed a lot of innovative ideas being implemented in both continents and housing about 50 young experts from both Africa and Europe. So young people and young advocates can directly engage with the hub. And next year, the hub will also transform into a lab, which will have a better engagement with grassroots level young advocates all the way to high level policy influence platforms. So we can take advantage of this great platform that was created by the commitment from both institutions. Over to you, Inge.
Thank you so much. And I can mention on the hub, there's a website and you can contact the hub directly through that. But Nyandoh, do you want to also respond from the AU side? Are there any platforms that advocates can use?
Thank you very much. Yes, there are platforms that advocates can use. We've launched the YAPI program, which is the Young Professional Program. We've also as well have the upcoming training, which is coming on the 27th to the 29th of October, on the Advocacy for Health for Action training, and more information about platforms through which advocates can table in their recommendations. You can get that through the African Union Youth Program social media handles for updates. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have a hand up from a question from Dora. Do you want to ask a question?
Yes. So my question is direct to Nyandoh as the AU. My question is, how are you guys, how are you making sure that those traditional leaders in communities are making sure that the rights of a girl child are respected, and if they're actually doing the needful to make sure that young girls are retreated from their marriages? Because a while ago, I came across a notice, or rather a document, that was emphasizing on the retreatment of young girls who are younger than 21 from their marriages. So now, how are you making sure that those young girls are retreated in communities and in Africa? Thank you.
Thank you very much. This effort to eliminate harmful practices and gender inequality, it's effort that needs everyone on board. And on the part of the African Union, specifically the Youth Division, we engage with youth using the MOOCAP framework. And here we mobilize youth to own this community engagement and take it to the ends through which we sitting at the African Union Commission cannot reach. And we know that nothing for us without us. So we also have the platform where we build the capacities of youth to take these messages and also take it to the hinterlands or hard to reach communities. And as well as we have the Egumeni session where when they have done all these community engagement, they come back for conversations, consultations, where we speak about this, we amplify best practices, and as well go back to the drawing board for solutions, for issues that are still plaguing, and then bringing interlord-based solutions. Thank you, over.
Thank you so much. I hope it answered your question, Dora. I see that Habiba has joined us again. If your network is better, do you want to ask a question now?
Yeah, sure. I think I can ask. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you for clarification on education, but I want to know how could the EU-African partnership ensure that all girls can benefit from digitalization? That was first. Then I can ask in another way, like during this COVID-19, many African countries are experiencing lockdown. I want to know what are EU-African partnership plans on promote digitalization for improvement of education level. Thank you.
So this is the question on digitalization and how girls can benefit from that in the framework of the EU-Africa partnership. Wondering if maybe Ambassador, you want to take the question?
Yes, I'm happy to try. I mean, the digital transformation is one of the, what I always call the 5+1 partnerships that we're working towards between the African Union and the European Union. So we are investing in terms of digital, we are helping to invest in the infrastructure itself, but we are also very much working on the whole issue of the governance of the internet, or digitalization. And we are very much aware, as I said also initially, of the impact of the COVID-19 and how that has affected especially, I mean, school children across the world, but also in Africa in terms of having access to education, and that many have actually dropped out. So I would just say it's one of the 5, and when I say +5, it's because we're working a lot on COVID-19. We're also working on green. We're working as part of digital investments, migration, mobility, and peace and security. So we have a wide variety, and digital is one of them. So I can just assure you that we are trying to work a lot on that agenda. There are even established high-level working groups between the 2 continents to try to bring that those issues across. And again, when we have negotiated these things, it's definitely up to us, but also up to important players like you here today to raise the questions in your countries, because you now know this is actually at least a priority area for the European Union in our engagement with Africa and with the African Union. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Habiba, I hope this sort of answered your question. We're actually also really kind of approaching the end of the panel. So before we finish, I would still like to give the floor to our young advocates who we heard from in the very beginning to really end this panel in an inspiring way. So if you guys have any final remarks, you have 1 minute max for your final remarks, because it's really late already. So can I give the floor first to Thokozile?
I would like to find out what the AU-EU partnership has done so far to ensure that women are empowered in African countries and in Zambia. And secondly, I would also want to find out what the partnership has done to reduce the issues of gender-based violence in our country because of all the different cases that we have and everything that's happening in our country with different girls being involved in abuse and gender practices. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. Unfortunately, I think we don't have time to take or answer more questions at this stage, but I'll definitely take a note of it, and we can probably get back to you with an answer later on from all the speakers. But Tokotsile, do you also have any final remarks to share with us as we are closing the panel?
No, I do not. I had the final questions that I would have liked to ask over what the EU-AU partnership is doing and my recommendations, of course, that I had mentioned earlier. And I think that's all that I had for my speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Nancy, do you have any final remarks for our speakers and audience today?
Yes, I do. For me, I believe in empowering girls and women to actively participate in politics because it helps to advance gender equality and eradicate poverty in our communities. And I hope and look forward to the AU and EU partnership to help in unlocking girls' power and creating a safe space for girls and women to actively participate in politics. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kevin, I know you have some final remarks to share with us.
Yeah, very true. Thank you very much. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for moderating this session and our decision makers who are in the call today and my fellow youth advocates and the audience in general. As we know that I'm very passionate on sexual reproductive health and rights, and we think that our recommendation will be taken and be implemented and put into actions. It's not just in paper. And I want to thank DSW for coming and supporting youth, the youth groups here in Kenya. And lastly, maybe I have a question that will be answered maybe later on or now, that what are programs do EU-AU partnership have in Kenya to making sure that we reduce the cases of sexual gender-based violence, teenage pregnancy, and early marriages? Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thanks, Kevin. I think for the question, we'll get back to you after the panel because we need to close very, very soon. But Laura, do you have also any final remarks from your side?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to echo the thanks for the opportunity to speak in this panel and speak with you all today. It's been an honor to be present, and it's been really positive hearing all of your responses and reactions. I was really grateful to hear that you're all very open and engaging, listening with us on these various issues. And I especially liked Nyandoh's comment of African youth being seen as partners and not just as beneficiaries. This is crucial to creating and implementing effective policy. I'm glad to hear that the need for action has been recognised. And as Ambassador Markussen had rightly pointed out, education and economic empowerment has suffered greatly due to the current pandemic. And I really welcome the 10% of funds that have been allocated for education over the period of those 7 years. The children of today are the future of tomorrow, and we need to invest in them now. And I look forward to seeing all this much needed action and change being implemented for girls and women across Africa and to ensure that no child is left behind. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Laura. And thank you everyone for the participation and the very fruitful and inspiring discussions today. Obviously, special thank you to all the young advocates for all the work you're doing in your own countries and globally, and really to making sure that the voices of girls and young people more broadly are heard. Thank you to all the decision makers in the room today from Europe and Africa for listening to us and making sure also that we're not forgotten and when it comes time to take action and fulfill all the commitments that have been made. Thank you to the organizers from the European Week of Action for Girls Coalition. And lastly, thank you to everyone who joined us in the listening mode today and asking your questions. And we will try to get back to you after the panel. So with that in mind, have a great rest of the day, wherever you are. Have a great week, and goodbye from me.
Yeah. Bye-bye to everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank
you. Bye.
All the best. Young advocates, keep doing what you do. It's only a matter of time till you actually become the decision maker in your own countries. So push for change.
Thanks for that, Bitania.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you and bye.
Bye-bye.